Hello. Welcome to another installment of the Central American Group's podcast, in which experts discuss topics related to doing business in Costa Rica, El Salvador, and the rest of the region.
Hello, welcome to the Central American Group series of podcasts. We have conversations with very knowledgeable people that are both internal and external to the organization. Today we have a wonderful young lady joining us. She's from the Association of Free Zones of the Americas. She's the director, and her name is Camilla Moreno. How are you today, Camilla?
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you very much for the invitation, and thank you for saying that young lady.
Well, it's true. Could you give us a little bit of a background information on yourself, just so that the listeners can have some familiarity with your biography?
So my name is Camilla Moreno. I'm from Colombia, Bogota. Currently, I'm based in Bogota, and I have worked for the past 14 years in attracting foreign direct investment. I have a master in international law and economics at the University of Bern. I lived for 3 years actually in China, in Beijing. And for the past 7 years almost, I've been working for the Association of Free Trade Zone of the Americas.
Can you tell us about the organization? For instance, when was it founded and what is the purpose of the group?
Yeah, so the association was created 24 years ago by a group of entrepreneurs that had their free trade zone, mainly from Central American and South American countries like Dominican Republic, Guatemala, Costa Rica, Uruguay, Colombia. And these entrepreneurs have their annual meeting to discuss different topics regarding their business. The group grew until 2011, where it was decided to create legally the association. So it's based in Bogota, but we currently represent 25 countries. Actually, we have among our members free trade zones, ministries of industry, Association of Free Trade Zones, National Association of Free Trade Zones, and consultants.
Okay, well, I have experience obviously working with free zones and working with industrial developments that are outside of free zones. Perhaps you could tell us what the benefits companies should consider when they're deciding whether to be in or out of a free zone. What type of benefits are there?
Great question, Stephen. So this is the main question that we receive from the investors, and it's our job to give them all the information. You have, of course, all the industrial parks. We have this really good real estate infrastructure. But the difference with free trade zones is that you have benefits, you have incentives. Regarding three main that we can talk in this podcast, the income tax, preferential income tax, zero VAT, and zero tariff for imported goods.
Can you give me a little bit of insight on your feelings with regard to a discussion that the U.S. government is having? The Biden administration is currently working with internationally to attempt to have installed a minimum global corporate income tax. From my perspective, I'm not in favor of this. I believe that every country should be able to compete as they see fit. Do you have any thoughts on this?
Well, that's a very, very interesting question, Stephen. And the thing, as you mentioned, is that every country has their own rules. And right now, after the pandemic, after all this China-US trade war, after the situation on the Suez Canal, the companies are really looking where to move, where they're going to put their next production process or their services. And each country has a lot of incentives for their company. So it sounds like a very romantic idea, but I don't know how practical it is going to be and how governments are going to be in favor because I definitely think that each country is going to have a very, very it's having not in the future. It's actually having a very big incentives for the free trade zones and for attracting companies. So if you are in a free zone in Central America, it's almost 0%. And then if there's another government telling you that you need to rise your income tax, your corporate income tax, to a higher percentage, this is going to create a lot of noise. And the companies that have already invested on the free zones are not going to be happy.
Yeah, I think it's rather impractical. That aside, what are the services that you offer to members of your organization?
Well, they're distributed into two main objectives, which is the promotion of the free trade zone, so that more investors see the free trade zones and want to invest in the free trade zone. And the other is to defend. As you just mentioned, and as you were asking, what do you think about this initiative? We have a lot of initiatives. Governments usually want to change the rules of the investors. And our objective and our service to these governments and to these, I say governments because we work closely with the ministries of trade and industry. We need to talk and conciliate with the ministries of finance, which usually are the ones that want to increase the incentives and the percentage of the income corporate tax. So from the association, we work with all the governments and show them what happens if you change the rules of the investor. It's not okay. We're going to increase the number of the income tax, and we're going to have benefits because we're going to receive more money or like a bigger budget to the government. We have seen that it creates completely the opposite. Companies leave the country and they look for other countries where it's the income tax, it's still more favorable for their business.
Yeah, we see something along those lines. Recently, we had an automotive company cancel a project here in the United States. And I personally think that the reason why that was done was because of the announcement of raising corporate income tax. That aside, however, in terms of free zone activities, we know that there's a number of different activities that can take place in free zones. Maybe you can give us an overview of those.
Of course. So in the free trade zones, they have logistics operations, shared services operations, including for KPO, BPO, ITO, call centers. Well, we also have manufacturing, of course. And when we say manufacturing, textiles, automobile, furniture, any manufacturing that you can imagine. So those are the three main that I can mention today: manufacturing, logistics, and services.
Our audience,
and of course, agricultural. There's some very specialized recently for agricultural.
You know, I found it very interesting. I've dealt with industry throughout my career, but recently I've been talking to a free zone operator in Uruguay, and they do all back office types of things. So, you know, I would imagine that a lot of our audience thinks that it's just manufacturing, but as you point out, you know, it's quite a few activities that can actually take place in free zones.
Exactly.
Our audience has a particular interest in Central America. And with that in mind, could you tell us a little bit about your activities specifically as they relate to Central America?
Of course. So Central America is also a very important market for us. And I'll give you some numbers and for the audience that they will realize how important free trade zones are. 56% of the total exports of Dominican Republic go out of the free trade zones. In Costa Rica, 6 out of 10 new created jobs are formally done on free trade zones. And right now they're reaching, still talking about Costa Rica, 8% of the global GDP of Costa Rica is created from free trade zones, from the business of free trade zones. So definitely, Central America is a big market for free trade zone. In Nicaragua, more than 150,000 formal employments are in free trade zones. In El Salvador, all the maquilas and the manufacturing and the textiles are also very, very important. And in Panama, there are actually 5 different regimes. So you have the regime of free zones, you have the regime of Panama Pacifico, which is an APP, public-private partnership, but you also have for big enterprises, and you also have for the logistics, a special regime for the logistic, which is called Depósitos Habaneros. So all these countries in Central America have free trade zones, and they're extremely important for their economies. Actually, if you see a map, and you can go inside our website, you will see a lot of points in our investor map, a lot of points, and all the points mainly are in Central America and Colombia.
You just mentioned your website. Our listeners are an inquisitive group of people, and if you could provide the URL, and we'll include this in the transcript to our conversation, but if you could provide the URL of the website, I think that'd be helpful.
Thank you. Thank you for that. So it's asociación, like the association, but in Spanish, Zonas Francas, zonasfrancas.org. And we have another one now that you mentioned, which is very, very interesting for the investors, which is called Relocate Latam. It was one of the initiatives that we created last year after we realized everything that was going on after the pandemic. And is the first specialized website with all the inventory of lots and offices and warehouses of the free trade zones in the region. So you can check both.
That must be a pretty comprehensive bit of information, because obviously you've got a lot of members. If listeners have further questions that they would like to ask you, how would they get in contact with you?
Well, you can search me on LinkedIn by Camilla Moreno, and then you write AZFA, which is AZFA. Or my email, of course, I can leave it to you, is director, for director, at asociacionzonasfrancas.org. Well, sorry for the Spanglish.
Don't worry about it. I think our audience is fluent in that. Thank you very much for joining us today. And we wish you and your organization success now and in the future.
Thank you, Stephen, for the invitation, and thank you to the Central American Group.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening. Sign up to receive the Central American Group's quarterly newsletter by visiting www.thecentralamericangroup.com.